Okay, I think we will get started now since it's just past 9. Greetings, everybody. A warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for tuning in today to our webinar, Protecting Community Trees, Local Governments, and Invasive Tree Pests. My name is Camille Morales, and I'm with the Science and Research team at ISCBC. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we're all joining today from different traditional territories across the province, but I'd like to recognize that I'm very grateful to be joining from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, who have stewarded the lands and waters in what is called Vancouver since time immemorial. We've got an excellent set of presentations for you today, covering some new and emerging tree pests, as well as invasive trees and management strategies for local governments. We'll have Sophie and Hayley here to talk about Vancouver's response to emerald ash borer, followed by Grahame from the province, who will be talking about the response to Dutch elm disease. We'll have a quick 15-minute break at 10:20, and then hand it over to Dan to discuss tree of heaven management on private lands, and Troy from CFIA to talk about 2 emerging invasive pests. At the end, we'll have a short facilitated session with some questions and an opportunity for discussion at the end. And we'll plan to conclude around 12 p.m. And just before we begin, I want to run quickly through a couple Zoom housekeeping items. If you experience any technical problems with Zoom, please use the chat box, and Torin, running tech support, will see if he can assist you. If you have a question during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll be taking time at the end of each presentation to answer questions, time permitting, and our team here will be monitoring the chat. If we run out of time to address all of the questions, or if you have any specific questions from the recorded presentation, we will share the questions and answers by email later. And we'll be recording this seminar, so if you want to view it again or share it, it'll be hosted on our YouTube channel soon. So to give you a quick background on the Invasive Species Council of BC, we're the largest provincial invasive species charity in Canada. We focus on education, outreach, training, and cross-border collaboration across Canada and internationally. And we're also a founding member and co-chair of the Canadian Council on Invasive Species. The ISCBC's mission is to take action to build healthy landscapes, habitats, and communities through education and responsible practices to prevent the spread of invasive species. We're guided by a diverse board of directors with representation from provincial government, federal government, local and regional governments, First Nations, industry members, recreation and tourism, regional committees, and environmental groups. Municipalities and local governments are in a unique position to turn the tide of impacts of invasive species within their jurisdiction. ISCBC helps coordinate the sharing of resources and networking for local governments in the province, supporting their success in invasive species management within their jurisdictions. And we're very proud to be able to work with Indigenous communities and partners throughout the province. Our Indigenous partners play a significant role in the work we do at ISCBC, including making recommendations for training and resource development and identifying opportunities to build key partnerships. ISCBC coordinates the Indigenous Invasive Species Network to help support communication between partners on invasive species, resource development, and initiatives. We support nations and bands to build capacity and actively manage invasives on the lands they steward. ISCBC's affiliate network brings together regional independent organizations working to build and provide a strong collective voice for BC, calling for increased action on invasive species. So I'm going to jump into doing a quick overview of some emerging invasive insects and diseases. First, we have emerald ash borer. I won't spend too long on this since Hayley and Sophie will be talking about emerald ash borer more in depth. But first, we have a couple ID points here. The main identifying feature of emerald ash borer is its metallic emerald green color here. It's got a bullet-shaped sort of body, and you can distinguish it from some similar species that we have here in BC, both native and invasive, by its shape, its color, and it has a smaller size than these ones mentioned here. It's only about 8.5 to 14 millimeters long, so it's pretty small. So emerald ash borer was first detected in eastern Canada and eastern US in 2002. Then about 20 years later, it was first detected on the west coast in Oregon. And not long after that, it was found for the first time in Vancouver in 2024. This is the kind of damage that emerald ash borer does. The adults feed on the leaves of ash trees, and the larvae feed on the inner bark and outer sapwood, eventually killing the trees. And it's had a huge economic impact across Eastern Canada and the US, where it's more prevalent. In BC, we mostly have ash trees planted as ornamental trees. So the loss of these trees would have a big economic impact, along with losing all the benefits that these street trees, ornamental trees provide in urban areas like shade and cooling. Moving on to Dutch elm disease. This is caused by a fungus which blocks the tree's ability to conduct water, which causes the tree to die. Emerald or elm bark beetles are the way that the fungus spreads between the trees. They're attracted to freshly pruned, sick, weak, or dying elm trees. The larvae develop in the inner bark, and then the adults emerge from infected trees and will fly to healthy trees and infect them with the fungus, causing the disease to spread. This is the kind of damage that Dutch elm disease causes. The leaves will wilt in the upper crown, they'll curl, shrivel, and turn brown in the summertime, and then remain attached in the winter. There's a staining of the sapwood. Trees infected with Dutch elm disease will have red streaks through the sapwood sometimes. And you can see the presence of the larval galleries that indicate that the beetles which transmit the fungus are present in the tree. All species of North American elm are susceptible. In BC, most elm trees are ornamental, so it poses a significant threat to both the nursery industry and to landscape plantings of elm in the province. The eastern provinces are considered infested. Saskatchewan is considered partially infested with Dutch elm disease. PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba are all regulated and considered to be generally infested. And the first detection in BC occurred here in 2024 in the Kootenay area. Another one to mention here is sooty bark disease. This is another fungus that is endemic to the Great Lakes region. It was first detected in the Pacific Northwest region of the US in 1968, but emerged there as a notable disease in 2020 and was confirmed in BC for the first time in 2022. This fungus primarily attacks maple trees, and its key hosts are one big native species that we have here, big leaf maple, as well as two ornamental maple trees that are commonly planted here as well, sycamore maple and Norway maple. It causes these black soot-like spores to accumulate in the bark of infected areas of the tree and creates cankers where the bark cracks and detaches from the tree. Also causes leaf wilt, branch dieback, crown dieback, defoliation, epicormic shoots. And the spores are spread very easily. They spread in the wind or when the tree is disturbed, and then will spread to other healthy maple trees. water stress, drought, heat, sunlight can all cause the disease to spread faster within trees and cause more damage. So climate change, a warming climate could impact the spread and severity of the disease over time. And there's currently no known treatment for this. And now I'll talk quickly about two invasive trees of note here in BC. Tree of Heaven is the first one here. This is commonly planted as an ornamental tree throughout BC. You can identify it by this gray textured bark that it has, especially in more mature trees. It has small white to yellow-green flowers, red berries, and pretty large compound leaves. These glandular teeth on the leaves in the corner there, how you can distinguish it from some other native species that look a bit similar. Tree of Heaven is native to Asia. As I mentioned, it was introduced here to BC as an ornamental tree. It outcompetes native plants. It's allelopathic, so it secretes toxins into the soil, which inhibits the growth of other plants, native plants nearby. And its roots can also damage infrastructure. And also important is that it's the preferred host of the invasive spotted lanternfly. And spotted lanternfly also feeds on grapes, apple trees, pines, oaks, walnuts, and poplar trees. So if spotted lanternfly enters BC, it could have some serious implications for vineyards and fruit orchards, potentially even damaging Garry Oak ecosystems. And another invasive tree to mention here is Russian olive. It's a small ornamental tree. It can grow to about 3 to 8 meters tall. It has these long, narrow silver leaves, and its fruit resemble olives. They're also kind of silver in color. And it outcompetes and outgrows native species. Okay, so a little ahead of time here. If anybody has any questions about any of these species, we've also got some experts here on emerald ash borer, tree of heaven, Dutch elm disease. If you have any questions about those, they can maybe jump in. Feel free to put your questions in the chat there.
No questions so far, Camille.
Okay. Well, if it's not too early for you, Sophie and Hayley, you can start your presentation then if we don't have any questions. If that works for you.
I think so. What do you think, Hayley? We can't hear you.
I was muted. Hello, everyone. All right. Can we see presentation all good? All right. So hello, everybody. My name's Hayley Chan. I'm an Integrated Pest Management Coordinator with Vancouver Board of Parks and Recreation, and with my lovely coworker introduce yourself.
Also IPM Coordinator.
Perfect. So yeah, we're going to talk about emerald ash borer in Vancouver today and what our response over the last year after the discovery of the insect has been. So just hopping right in. So just a bit of background on emerald ash borer itself. So Camille gave us a little bit of an overview, but the emerald ash borer is an invasive beetle native to East Asia. So it's a bark-boring bipestrid beetle, so it's in the jewel beetle family. It feeds nearly exclusively on Fraxinus species. There's been some evidence of it feeding on white fringe tree as well, but it's not been shown to be able to fully reproduce and complete its life cycle in that tree. So we typically just focus on ash as the main host species. And it's so all true ash trees, so not mountain ash, which aren't in the Fraxinus genus, are susceptible to EAB. So in terms of EAB landing in Vancouver, so in July of 2023, CFIA received a suspected EAB specimen from a member of the public from downtown Vancouver. So the story kind of goes, it was a gentleman that was downtown, kind of a weird happenstance of perfect circumstances. He was sitting on a bench downtown. A beetle kind of showed up beside him, said, "Hey, that's, a cool beetle." He was an amateur entomologist photographer in some regard. So he snapped a picture of the beetle, realized kind of what it was, caught it, saved the sample miraculously, which was then submitted to CFIA and then was later lab confirmed to be EAB. So it was treated as an interception until we had confirmed that EAB was present in our ash trees as well. And so after that, we had gone out and started looking for larvae, and we found larvae in trees. So the current distribution in BC, so we are in a regulated area now for emerald ash borer. So the regulated area includes all of the city of Vancouver, the UBC and UEL, the University Endowment Lands just west of us. It includes the city of Burnaby now, as there was one positive find in Burnaby. Surrey as well, as there was a positive find in Surrey. And then New Westminster's kind of just been lumped in because they are right in between Burnaby and Surrey. So that way we have one contiguous regulated area rather than, having just a little blip of non-regulated area in between. So if you want to speak on the ash map?
Sure. So we are fortunate in Vancouver that for a long time we've had our civic tree inventory digitized. So we talked to some of our GIS wizards, and they were kind enough to create our ash tree map for us. So all the pink dots, well, all the dots are ash trees. The pink ones are trees that are presumably still healthy. They're basically trees that we do not know whether or not they're positive. And last we looked at them, they were fine. Anything black has been trees that were removed and that are negative for EAB. So basically trees that died because of things like construction damage or storm damage or something like that. Then we get to the colorful bits. So anything red is positive. And anything that is purple has been removed since we discovered that they were positive. So that, for us, the main part of our infestation is in the north part of the city. So Falls Creek and then into East Van. So this is where we focused our removals last year. And what we also did last year, which Hayley will talk about in a bit, is the treatment. So in order to be able to represent the treatment kind of visually, especially for our management teams and our politicians, we decided, since the treatment is done every 2 years, we decided to basically color code trees that were treated on an even year and trees that were treated on an odd year. So since we started last year, we only have blue dots. We are looking forward to adding a new color to our map. And this helps to show so how far it's actually spread, right? Because we've got dots down into sort of the southern half of the city. But it also shows us where we don't know anything yet. And as you'll see a bit later, it'll help us. We're going to use this map to help us determine what kind of monitoring we're going to do for this year.
And I just add as well that the orange dots too represent
Yeah.
poor candidate trees. So those are trees that, upon assessment of determining if they're good for treatment, we had two pieces of criteria that either weren't met, and I'll talk about them a bit later. So if they're not met, then it means that we're not going to treat it. So those poor candidates would eventually be added to a removal list, and that helps us see, where do we need to focus removal efforts as well. So, yeah. Okay, so just a bit on more about EAB itself. So the adults, they're small, like Camille said, about 8 millimeters long beetles. They're this vibrant metallic green, and when they open their wings underneath, they actually have it's quite a bright red underneath. And then when they exit the tree, when they chew themselves out from the bark, they leave like a D-shaped exit hole. And then the larvae, mature larvae, they're serrately segmented. So they have like that kind of little bell-shaped body segments, and they have brown mandibles at their head on the capsule. They're about 25 millimeters long, so they're quite big, honestly, when they're full size. And they're the ones that chew those serpentine galleries through the cambium, which you can kind of see in that picture. And just as we were waiting to get into the meeting here, Troy Kimoto, who's also on this meeting, he did a lot of work on when EAB was first discovered back east, and he just sent us some cool pictures actually of some, I guess it's a mutation of some sort in the emerald ash borer, where instead of green, they're actually red on top. So we can share those pictures later, but not something we've seen here quite yet, but apparently something that's seen more rarely in Ontario, but just an interesting tidbit there that emerald ash borer is not always emerald. This is just signs and symptoms of EAB infestation. So what to look for. Your ash trees, they're going to have really yellowing foliage, quite a bit of thinning crown, and a lot of crown dieback. And like I mentioned, those serpentine galleries under the bark, which I have a couple pictures of later on, they're packed with frass. So from the larva that's chewing through the bark, it leaves its frass packed into those tunnels behind it. You'll see vertical cracks in the trunk, and oftentimes they'll actually expose the EAB galleries underneath. That's a good way of, not having to peel the bark off of the tree. You can usually see it actually, just from eye level. Oftentimes too, we'll see suckering from the areas and the branches in the trunk where these galleries are. And then you'll also often find the D-shaped exit holes in the bark. And by the time they're getting, into the trunk, your infestation is fairly far along by that point. So it's just kind of a visual indicator of these are some trees in Cooper's Park in Vancouver, where close to our supposed epicenter of our infestation is. So you can see the progression from the street view there from 2022 to 2024, and just how much thinning is happening through that canopy. So you can kind of see, yeah, just the effects of it. And these trees are still healthy, more or less healthy these days as well. We'll do another assessment this year and see, if they're getting close to having too much canopy loss, then they'll end up being candidates for removal. But for now, they still provide a lot of benefits, even while they're still infested. They still provide a lot of benefits to the community, being in that spot. Obviously, you can see people sitting in the shade underneath them in the summer. So we want to retain them for as long as possible. And yeah, so these are those serpentine galleries we were talking about. So that's where it's kind of neat when you actually expose the gallery. You can see from the image on the left that you can kind of see the progression of the age of the larva. So it starts out very small and skinny as that egg on the bark has just hatched, and that larva is going underneath the bark, and as it feeds, it's getting bigger and going through different instars. And you can kind of track that gallery if you're looking to actually extract the larva out of the branch. It's very helpful to you follow the gallery to where it's at its widest, and oftentimes you can kind of excavate underneath and pull that larva out to pull it out for samples. So just kind of an interesting tidbit. The image in the middle there, you see that's a very advanced stage of infestation. That's probably one of the worst we've seen so far. So that's a tree that's been infested for many, like multiple years. So the insects are, they're chewing through, emerging as adults, and then going back in year over year, and they've made their way basically through this entire tree. And then you can see the galleries through the bark cracks on the far right there. So that's a good quick indicator.
Hayley.
Yep.
Sorry, I go back to that previous slide, please. Yeah, I want to say that the middle picture is the bark was removed by us. This wasn't naturally occurring where, all of a sudden your tree looks like that. We actually did strip the bark off.
We did, yeah. We stripped the bark off of that one. The indicator that we had originally, though, also was the bark had been stripped off by someone else in the community. And Troy had happened upon this tree and seen the galleries, and then we continued to peel some more of the bark off. So, but this tree was riddled with exit holes as well, though, just all throughout the bark. So quite heavily infested. But yeah, the bark doesn't naturally just kind of slough off, though, on its own. It does still have to be peeled off. And there's just a close-up of those D-shaped exit holes. So not super easy to see unless you're looking up close for them, but they're pretty distinct, though, and they'll always be, that flat edge with the round top. And then just the suckering from the base. But the suckering can happen on branches as well, though, as the infestation moves further down the tree. So the impact of EAB, so heavy feeding of that cambium, typically girdles the tree. Back east, we see about after 1 to 3 years. We're not 100% sure yet how fast our trees are going to succumb to EAB infestation. Things kind of seem to be moving a bit slower here. So it's kind of we'll have to see. This data is from back east, though. So up to 99% of all ash trees in an area are killed typically within 8 to 10 years once the beetle arrives. So it's had devastating impacts back east. And, it will eventually, a lot of ash trees here will succumb to it. Again, we're just not sure how fast exactly that's going to happen. Part of the problem with this beetle too is that it's quite hard to detect initially. It readily establishes under the radar, again, because most of that life cycle is occurring inside the tree. They also tend to infest the tree from high up at first, so you typically don't see a lot of the damage until more and more of the tree start succumbing. So the beetle spreads locally by flight. They can fly up to like 20 kilometers. They typically won't go that far. They'll find the next closest host tree typically if they're spreading out. But then they also spread long distances though by hitchhiking and then on vehicles and infested material. So firewood is a big vector for spread for these guys. So this is just an image of the potential canopy loss that we could be seeing. So you can see the ash trees all along the side there around the red box. That was a positive tree that we'd had removed. And the satellite image just kind of shows you can see how that canopy loss can really affect these ash heavy blocks in terms of loss of shade and cover and everything. So we'll see quite a big impact on canopy eventually. So part of our kind of pig plans for this coming year. We're going to be doing a bunch of monitoring and mostly focusing in the areas where we don't have a ton of data yet. So this was some sampling that we've done in 2024 with Synergy Semiochemicals. They produce these panel traps and also are the producers of the funnel trap that you can see hanging off of the bucket up at the top there. So this is just a monitoring tool for us basically to kind of have a passive way of knowing like, hey, are there insects in this area of the city or not? So the unfortunate part about these traps though is that they're not quite as effective as other lured insect traps, like the Japanese beetle traps. They're not always as attracted to them. So it's not a guaranteed tool. If they're not on the traps, we don't 100% know if they're in that area of the city, but it's a good passive way though, just to have eyes in other spots around the city. So our plan for this year, so we're going to focus on areas with high densities of ash trees with no known positives yet. So, and then we'll be using 2 lures on the traps as well, and there'll be mid-season lure changes and checks and everything. So that's the plan for now. So a bit about our treatment program. So we use triazine. So triazine, it's a systemic insecticide. It's injected directly into the base of the tree. The active ingredient is azadirachtin. It's a derivative of the neem tree seed. So kind of preferable in that it's, a bit more of a naturally derived product than other pesticides. There are other products that are approved in the States for treating for treating emerald ash borer. One of them in Canada is also what is it? It's not imidacloprid, but it's a neonic though, and we have a blanket ban on neonics in the city. So treason was the option that we had to go with. So trees are treated on a 2-year cycle for us as well. So that's that even and odd year treatment that we'll start seeing. So the canisters are inserted into drill holes that are drilled around the base, and then the natural pressure in the tree takes up the product. So our treatment criteria, I meant to touch on this a little bit earlier. So right now it's within 250 meters of an ash tree that's confirmed positive with EAB, is the area that we're focusing on. The trees have to be over 30 centimeters in DBH, so at diameter at breast height. And they also have to present less than 30% canopy loss. Trees with more than 30% canopy loss, they're really not likely to recover even with treatment from infestation. So they're kind of too far gone at that point. And then trees that are smaller than 30 centimeters, at that size, they're easier to just remove and replace with a less susceptible species. So the treatment, it's not cheap and it takes a long time. So we want to get, we want to treat trees that are going to give us the longest lifespan after treatment. So.
Yeah, we talked a lot to municipalities back east in Ontario and Quebec, and tried to get as much information from them about, how they were planning treatments and all that. Now, they have a much, much higher density of trees than we do, right? There, in some cities, it was, 95% were ash trees. So it meant for scheduling, it was easier for them, but the one thing they kept telling us when we were asking them how long the treatment would take, they were all like, it's pretty quick. I'm like, yeah, okay, but can you give us a time? Like, what's pretty quick? 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours? And they were all like, we're from 15 minutes to an hour. Well, turns out that for us, it can actually, most of the time, it's, around probably the half-hour mark. But unfortunately, we ran across some trees that took well over an hour, up to 2 hours. And so because of this passive uptake, it is dependent on not just weather condition, but also the condition of the tree. And some of those trees that weren't taking up the product quickly, we suspect, while they weren't showing signs, like excessive signs of damage, we suspect that there's already a lot of damage to the tree from EAB. And so those, are probably unlikely to recover, but, we'll wait to see. But one thing for sure is we do have to plan for a little bit more time than we originally thought.
And luckily too, there's a pretty wide period of time in which we can do the treatment because it's a systemic and because it stays in the tree for so long. We have basically the whole adult flight period, which here it's from about late May is kind of when we saw the first ones emerge last year, but it all depends on weather conditions. And since we've had a fairly warm winter this year, we could see emergence a bit earlier, but we have basically the whole adult flight period from May to probably October-ish to do treatments potentially. So it's a long window, which works in our favor. So, so just a little bit more on treatment candidates, a visual indicator. So tree on the left, obviously not looking too hot, a lot of dieback, yellowing canopy. I think if you got closer up, there'd probably be cracks as well in the bark. So not an ideal candidate. It's already seeing a lot of dieback, so not something that we would probably treat. And this one got removed ultimately at the end of last year. But the one on the right, though, it's a decent sized tree. It's probably right about at that 30 centimeter mark. And canopy is still looking, pretty healthy, pretty full, and provides, some good shade to that stretch of the block. So that's definitely one that we would want to treat and retain for as long as possible. So for 2026, our general treatment plans, so any new positives, so anything that we kind of discovered after the end of our treatment last year, going into this year, there's been a couple that have popped up. So we want to treat within the 250 meter radius of those trees. And then trees that were treated in 2025, we're going to try to expand that treatment zone around those ones to new trees beyond that 250 meter radius. So kind of just going outwards from there, and then also including those new positives. And I'm sure more will come up throughout this year as our monitoring program continues. But so in 2025, though, we did treat, Sophie likes to say, we treated over 200 ash trees. We treated 201 ash trees with trees in last year. So it was a good amount of trees more actually I think than we thought we would treat, given everything surrounding it. So we're looking forward to this coming year and seeing how much more we can get done even earlier in the year. So stay tuned for that. And you might have noticed in a couple of the pictures before as well. So this was just kind of an information campaign that we kind of started with the ash trees too. So treated trees initially were marked with a green band. So it's just like flagging tape essentially that we've printed with our website and a QR code that takes you to the website directly for more information. People took notice right away. We started getting, a decent amount of public service requests saying like, hey, the bands are falling off the trees. You guys need to come and like staple them back on, or that kind of thing. So we wanted to make it an indicator that this tree is susceptible, and you might see some effects of this later on. But we didn't want to make it like this tree is going to get cut down right away by marking it with like a big red X or something like that. So we thought that this would be a good visual indicator for people to take notice of ash trees and know where we might start seeing some gaps in the canopy, but not to incite panic right away and still inform. So we talked a bit about removals. So at the end of 2025, we had about 60 positive or suspect trees that were removed ultimately at the end of the year. So these were trees, again, that were not candidates for treatment. They were either already dead, confirmed positive, or just, in quite poor condition. So we'll inspect more trees this year to determine if more removals are necessary, which we didn't take out all the trees that probably could have been removed last year, just because we didn't want to, shock too many neighborhoods right away with removing all their trees all at once. So we kind of prefer to do some removals in phases if we can. So there will be more removals this year, and we'll determine, where to target them.
This is actually, can you go back to that one? Yeah. This is one of the challenges that we're going to have to face, and it's going to involve both our senior leadership, but also taking a really hard look at our tree canopy and also at our budgets and capacity. We have just under 8,000 ash trees. Obviously they're not all going to die at once, and we're not quite sure what that time span will be for decline and ultimate removal. And so we're still wrestling with how many trees do we treat? How many trees do we slate for removals? If we do nothing, how many trees per year are going to have to come out, in 5 years, and from, the next 5 years to maybe 15 years or something like that. And this would all be above and beyond what we normally see as, with tree mortality and removals for damage and other issues. So it could potentially have a really big impact on our operation, because it's not just removing the trees, but then it's also stumping them and replanting them. So it's a big trickle down effect that you see when you remove trees. The other thing too, I really want to point out that the picture on the screen, if you focus really clearly on it, you can see that the tree in the front is pretty much almost completely dead. It's got about, I don't know, maybe 22 leaves on it. The green you see is actually from the liquid ambers that are behind along the sidewalk. This is important for the next slide.
So yeah, inevitably, nobody likes to see a tree getting removed. Some people have stronger feelings than others, particularly in certain neighborhoods.
So I've been with the city for 30 years, and I love that after 30 years, I'm still bringing the same level of expertise and work ethic, because that middle one just is awesome to me. Everyone in the neighborhood is furious that these trees along the marina have been removed and replaced with disgusting orange cones on top of the stump. I have no idea who made that decision, but it's absolutely obscene. This city civic service is a disgrace. So I'm, super proud to say that after 30 years, I am still a disgrace. But it really goes to show, and these are just colors from those trees on Marina side that were, let me stress out, that they were really
Stone
dead.
dead.
There was no, this isn't like full July, beautiful, like there is nothing there. They're not coming back. They're not sleeping. And that's another concern, right? For municipalities is that even though you try to explain why it is we're holding off till the very end to remove these trees, and that could actually jeopardize our healthy trees, right? Because the longer we let these non-candidate for treatment trees stand, the more EAB they're going to pump out to actually attack other healthy trees. So this is another thing that we're going to have to contend with as we continue down this path.
It also becomes a safety thing as well, because as those trees, the further along they get an infestation, and once they're dead, the longer that they stand, the more brittle they get, right, and the more susceptible to storm damage or wind events, or heavy snow events, or wind. Um, they fall easier is the issue, right? They'll drop branches more readily, so it does become a public safety issue as well. The longer we leave them up, so ultimately we can't make everybody happy, but try as we might, we apparently are still a disgrace. So so just a couple last things here. So what do we do with the debris once we remove a tree? So we are, again, like I said, under that regulated area. So removing that infested tree, it can be problematic, as all ash material is regulated under the phytosanitary directives by CFIA. So it's any part of that tree. So fresh leaves, branches, sawnwood, bark, logs, chips, all of that. It's all regulated. So it can't leave our regulated area without a movement certificate, and unless it's going basically directly to a disposal facility. And the two approved methods for getting rid of that debris right now, it's either being deep buried at the landfill, like the Japanese beetle infested material, or it's getting incinerated by one of several locations. So it can be challenging and costly for both pruning and removals, because these ash trees, they still do need some pruning as well, right? Like we're still doing clearance pruning from stop signs and off of people's houses and things. But what do you do with that debris after, right? Where do you empty your chip truck? What do you do with the logs that are too big to chip from a tree that was removed? And then what happens to the stump once that stump is either ground or pulled out? So the movement certificate, like I mentioned, from CFA, it's along with a disposal plan is necessary. So we have an in-city holding facility. Basically, it's a yard that we've used historically to store, logs and stumps from trees that we've removed as well. Historically, this has just been shipped off and ground down to our landfill, but we've been in contact now with the contractor who's certified to deal with the high-risk dunnage from ships. So their material gets shipped down to Surrey, ground up at their facility, and then it gets shipped off to Merritt to their waste energy facility to be burned. And that's all, their whole system is approved by CFIA for that. So we've been in contact with them. So they handle all of this yard now. It's kind of where we're dumping, all the trees that get removed and any ash chip that, we don't have a home for right now. So the system's been working out quite well, and we're in the talks with them now to eventually start taking all of our chip debris from our yards as well. So it'll all just go to the same facility, and then we don't have to separate the ash material as well. So it'll make things easier for our crews ultimately. And I believe that's it. So Sophie and I, that's our emails there. So if you guys have any questions above and beyond the coming days, feel free to email us. We're always happy to chat, or if you have questions about incoming EAB or other insects, yeah, we're always happy to answer questions. So I think we've probably got a bit of time for questions now. Actually, I think we were a bit early, so I think we've got 5-10 minutes now.
Yeah. thanks to the both of you. There was one question that was put into the chat, but I think most of it was answered. I'll read it out anyways in case you want to expand on it a little bit, Haley, or Sophie. Movement control. How have you been disposing of the infested ash trees that were removed?
Yeah, so yeah, that's basically how right now. So our crews um our crews take down the tree right now, and then the wood gets shipped down to that facility at First and Rupert, and then we call their numbered company, and they're all it's a funny company. They're
Yeah.
all cousins, basically. They're all related, and it's a series of companies.
Enterwood is the name of the company.
Enterwood, yeah. So they'll take the logs and the chip and everything, take it down to their facility again, grind it up, and then B-train it in covered trains to Merritt to their facility.
Yeah, so
I
we,
think.
for a long time too, when we were working with just pruning the trees, we were reusing the chips in town. And so they were being used mainly in parks that were already infested, to shore up pathways and things like that. But and we were holding off on doing removals until we could set up the process with them to actually properly dispose of the wood. And one of the big things with them that it's the grinding that was one thing that we couldn't do ourselves in-house. We can chip branches, but once you get into tree trunks, our chippers aren't big enough, right? The most they can handle is up to 16 inches, but that's especially with ash trees, and especially if you're removing ash trees that aren't quite dead yet, it's brutal on the chippers. And so it would absolutely wreck our machines if we tried to chip these large chunks. And then anything bigger, we would have to, split somehow and work it. And the other thing too is we also can't deal with the stumps, the ones that we pull. The ones we grind, they're ground into the ground, so it's not a problem. But the ones we pull, well, those things are massive, right? And so there's just no way for us to really treat them. So working with these guys was really great because they have the big tub grinders. They're able to move the materials securely, quickly, without causing any escapes. So it's a good thing. Lori, to answer your second question about the why ship to Merritt, it's simply because Innerwood, they work with the Merritt facility. They're set up to be they bring just as Hayley said, daily B trains up to Merritt for burning. So it was just, if we would have to kind of restart a whole new system, and we would be left with not being able to grind the stuff ourselves, right? So that's why we're not going to our facility.
I think too, when incineration was first kind of brought up as an option too, we'd looked into the waste energy facility. The requirements to dump there though is also kind of, for us at least, and the way that we move things around wasn't really going to work with our system, I think, because what was it, Sophie, that the trucks each had to have their plates registered, they have to get a swipe card, they have to be self-dumping.
That wasn't
that
so much the issue. The issue is they don't take logs.
That too, yeah.
That was the
So
big thing, is we were still left with how, like, they would take the chips, no problem, but how do they take logs? And so we would be left with, back to the same issue of having to basically split the wood, chip it ourselves, and then truck it out. So
yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but if there are any more questions, please feel free to put them in there. And if there's any time at the end of the day, I'm sure our presenters will do their best to answer them.
yeah, for sure. And if anybody's ever interested in seeing EAB live or the treatments, we're always happy to welcome guests over and take them around town.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sophie and Hayley, for your presentation. That was great. Now I think we will turn it over to Grahame from the Ministry of Transportation and Transport to talk about Dutch elm disease treatment and elm removal in the province.
Great, thank you. Can everybody see my screen? Sounds like a yes?
Yeah,
Yes,
looks
we can
good
see.
from.
Perfect. If you don't mind, I will be off video for today. I'm a little bit sick, so probably don't want to see my pallid face. But yeah, thank you for inviting me. I was just going to talk a little bit about Dutch elm disease and how we've managed it operationally on our roads. Sorry, I just need to get my screen sorted out here. There we go. So Dutch elm disease, just a little bit about it. It's a fungus that's native to Europe and Asia. I believe there's two sort of common strains in North America, and I believe the more aggressive one is actually from Eastern Asia, if I'm not mistaken. It causes very rapid dieback of elm trees, typically within a few years, although in some cases, trees can pretty much die back almost completely within one season. And it is spread mainly by bark beetles. So both native and non-native bark beetles can spread it. There is also some evidence that it can spread by equipment. That's not something that I've read a lot about, but it's sort of a little bit anecdotal. And so a little bit more on that later. But specifically for the beetles, they are attracted to sort of more injured and weak trees. Those are the ones that they will seek out. And that includes trees that have been, for example, like recently pruned. Generally, American elms are susceptible. There are many elm species. And other ones have sort of varying susceptibility or resistance. And again, anecdotally, it seems that Siberian elm is actually quite resistant. And note that the Siberian elm is quite common in southern BC, and generally we're considering it invasive. American elms are more commonly planted in urban environments. So Dutch elm disease management is very challenging. There are fungicides that are available to treat individual trees, but carrying that out at scale is very difficult. I'm also not, should say I'm not an expert in this disease, but my understanding is that the fungicides do have sort of varying effectiveness as well. Generally, what occurs as far as the management is control of the vector, so bark beetles. Many areas where they are growing American elms for the horticultural industry, which is the sort of the main main producer of American elms anyway. Many of those facilities will carry out control of bark beetles to just reduce that vector and reduce the spread into their facilities. Dutch elm disease is widespread in eastern North America. So it's been in Ontario and Quebec, I believe, for quite some time, through Manitoba as well. But it was detected for the first time in BC in 2024 in the Kootenay boundary. And so got a map here showing two trees that were detected, like I said, in 2024. Both of those were on Ministry of Transportation jurisdiction. So one outside of Rossland and then one in Warfield in southeastern BC there. So a little bit about how we actually removed the trees. So a lot of of work went into sort of the background to make this happen. So first of all, we had to confirm the jurisdiction and the ownership. Both the trees we believed were at least partially on Ministry of Transportation jurisdiction, but one was quite a ways up a hill, and it wasn't exactly clear where the jurisdictional boundary was. So that required us reaching out to the landowner, identifying them, contacting them, confirming where the tree was actually located. We determined actually that the property boundary was basically right down the center of the tree, recognizing that our ministry has the ability to remove this tree. We just sort of took full ownership of this one. Next was actually preparing sort of the operational plan. So how are we going to remove it? What are we going to do with the materials and things like that? So we organized disposal at a nearby landfill for deep burial. So again, this is another CFIA regulated species like emerald ash borer, and so moving any material associated with it requires a movement certificate as well as a disposal certificate, so that that material can be tracked and disposed of in a way that it can be monitored. So in this case, we were lucky. We had a landfill just nearby in Warfield, just a few kilometers down the road. So the disposal, like the trucking costs, were very minimal, and we coordinated with the regional district who operates that landfill facility to not only waive the tipping fees, this is not something that they're normally expecting to receive, but also make sure that the material was going to be deep buried properly, and also that they had equipment on hand to actually carry that out. Because again, this isn't something that they're typically receiving at their facility, and that the disposal depth was 2 meters. So the actual removal now. So the trees at Warfield were small and just easily removed, maybe 15 feet high, relatively small DBH. However, the tree in Rossland was a very large, mature specimen, and this one required an arborist for removal. So, and that one was much more difficult. It was also up a hill and was quite difficult to access. So for the large tree, it produced very large logs. Those were bucked into rounds and loaded into a gravel truck. And this material was covered during transit. Our goal for this was to avoid chipping too much material, at least the large stuff where we had to, just to avoid potentially causing that fungus to become airborne and expose the fungus to the, or sorry, expose our machinery and equipment to the fungus. Because we were concerned about potential contamination of the equipment, especially chainsaws and chipping material and things like that might go on to be used in other areas or on other trees and potentially spreading it. All that equipment was decontaminated with a 70% alcohol solution. I believe we also considered a bleach solution as well, but it was decided to go with alcohol, one, because it was just easily available. It's a little bit more benign, and also bleach can actually damage like ferrous materials like iron and steel and things like that. So not something you're typically wanting to use on your equipment. So just a few pretty pictures now. So this is just the small tree that was removed. And this is actually during the summer. You can see it's starting to sort of turn a little bit orange and brown at the very top there, but otherwise it actually looks relatively healthy. This is when we removed it. We removed it in the winter, so obviously it's not going to have any leaves on it anyway. And then this is the actual removal. We did try to rake up as much material as well to avoid leaving that on site, and that was also picked up and taken to the landfill as well. And this is the large tree. Again, you can see the browning and flagging at the top of the tree is quite a bit more pronounced on this one. And you can see it's growing basically right along that fence line, which is the boundary between the ministry jurisdiction and the private land. And you'll see it a little bit more in the other pictures, but it is up a little bit of a hill and was a little bit more difficult to access. Nevertheless, we were able to get into the area using an excavator. And this is just them sort of cleaning up all the debris. The tree was actually sort of cut and just sort of pushed over and then bucked up on the ground. So that did generate a lot of sort of slash and broken branches and things that we tried to clean up as much as we could. You can also see, especially in this one, you can see some cones that were set up. That's another thing that we need to consider when we're doing any kind of like tree removal like this on transportation jurisdiction is the safety aspect. Because of the work we're doing and the space we needed, this was also around sort of a blind corner. We needed to have traffic management on both sites to make sure that the crews were able to work safely. And again, just from the other side, just cleaning up all the material. And then this is the stump that was left behind. So we had initially planned to grind up the stump. However, we weren't able to access a stump grinder for one. And furthermore, we didn't think even if we had one that we would be able to get it up easily to the grind out the mature tree. So instead, we just cut them low, and then we followed up with a cut stump treatment later on. Here's the material just being deep buried at the landfill. Okay. And then just sort of a little bit on the challenges and kind of the next steps. So like I said, the initial plan was to use a stump grinder to remove the stump. However, this wasn't available. So we followed up with a cut stump herbicide treatment. And basically that's where you apply herbicide to the cambium around the tree. And that prevents it from just suckering back, because these trees are very aggressive suckers. And if you don't do that, they even, removing the very large tree to the extent that we did, is very likely to produce suckers and it will just grow back. So by doing the follow-up herbicide treatment, we're hopefully killing that root system to prevent the tree from just growing back. Another challenge was just replacement of the tree. The one tree, it was on the border of the private land. And part of the agreement with the landowner was that they actually did quite like the tree. They were very supportive of having it removed. However, they did request that something be put back in its place. So we needed to coordinate and arrange for that to occur as well. Obviously, we weren't putting in something of the same size, and obviously not an American elm. But still, that is something to consider. Is that, again, many of these trees, when they're healthy, folks do like them, and they are sad to see them go, even if they are supportive of the treatment overall. It took quite a considerable amount of planning and coordination, a lot of my time, a lot of back and forth between the CFIA, with the regional district, with the folks at the landfill, with the private landowner, with the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society, who did the tree replacement, tree planting, and the herbicide treatment. Coordination with our maintenance contractors who actually carried the work out. So that just takes a lot of time for what is, at the end of the day, removal of only 2 trees. Then there was the direct cost itself. So this is not including my time, just the actual bill we had to pay. It was about $15,000 between paying our maintenance contractors to carry out the work, the traffic control, and things like that. So it gets quite expensive to do these kind of as a one-off. Obviously, in any project, there's kind of an economy of scale. So if you were to do this for a larger area, the cost sort of per unit removal of tree might come down, but still it is still quite significant. Also, just the large amount of debris that needed to be generated, or that was generated and needed to be removed. Really, we only had the one large tree. The other tree was quite small and pretty easy to remove. But the large mature tree did generate a lot of material. Luckily, in working with the regional district and the landfill, they were able to accept that and happy to do so. But they did say that, if this is a project where, we realize that Dutch elm disease is much more widespread and we have to do this at larger scale, that they would not be able to accept that material. So it would just be too much for the landfill. And so, then we'd be in a situation where we'd be looking at doing something like, like Sophie's doing with the emerald ash borer material, trucking it elsewhere or something like that. And again, that just increases the cost. And then just a couple other considerations as well. So proud to say that we removed the only 2 known infected trees in BC. However, we do think that there's pretty good chance that Dutch elm disease is actually much more widespread than those 2 trees will indicate. So the way it was actually discovered is quite interesting. It was actually somebody from the CFIA who was visiting the area, and this person was very familiar with Dutch elm disease because she had worked with it in Ontario, I believe. She saw some flagging trees, looked into it a little bit more, and actually used the time slider on Google Earth to sort of look at trees that she saw that were looking infected or dead, and sort of going back in time on Google Street View to a couple years to see when those trees were healthy. And so using that, we think that Dutch elm disease is actually relatively widespread throughout the central Kootenays. But the only 2 trees that have been tested to sort of the gold standard lab testing are the 2 that we've removed. So it's important to keep that in mind. Although we've removed those 2, it's looking like it's widespread, although we haven't confirmed that to the same level yet. And we're doing that working with local partners. We're also spreading the word amongst arborists and other folks who are in the vegetation management world. Another interesting aspect of this is that it affects, Dutch elm disease affects elm trees in different ways. And most of the elm trees that we think are on at least transportation jurisdiction in the southern interior, where it's pretty widespread, are Siberian elm. When I first heard of Dutch elm disease coming to BC, I have to be honest, I thought, well, hey, maybe we kind of have a little bit of biocontrol here for elm trees, whether we wanted it or not. The interesting thing is that Siberian elm trees, at least anecdotally from my contacts in Manitoba who've been working on this for quite some time, Siberian elms seem to be quite resistant. So we're probably not going to see it spreading through that species. It's going to be mostly in American elms. So American elms are generally, like I said, the species of elm tree that we see planted in more urban areas, although they can grow sort of feral, like on our roadsides where they weren't planted. But it seems like it's mostly going to be an urban issue, as well as we do have several American elm growers in the Kootenays who are shipping their product to Alberta. So we do want to protect those ones as well. One interesting thing is that I had read some suggestion that there may be a push to produce like Siberian elm, American elm hybrids that would be resistant to Dutch elm disease. We're not necessarily supportive of that because, the assumption there is that you'll produce something. Yes, it may be resistant to Dutch elm disease, but it would probably be more aggressive like Siberian elm, which we consider invasive. So not super supportive of creating those hybrids that way. Like I said, removing trees at scale is costly and, to be honest, unlikely. If it is as widespread as we think, we're probably looking at more of a containment area rather than an eradication program. But again, we're still collecting the data to make that decision. And then finally, our operations. Are we as a ministry contributing to spread, right? So when we're doing our brushing operations and things like that, are we inadvertently picking up the fungus on that equipment and then spreading it to another area? And then also through those activities, we are creating injured and damaged trees that are more susceptible to the disease as well. So we do need to consider how our operations may also be affecting the spread as well. And that's it for me. Happy to answer a few questions.
Thanks, Graham. Right now, if anyone does have questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A box or in the chat. Oh, Sophie. Sophie has a question.
Hi. Not so much a question, just a couple of comments. One about the Siberian elms. They are a horrible, horrible tree and should never.
Yes, I agree.
We are stuck, unfortunately, with a very, very long block that I call my Tim Burton block, which, lovely as a Tim Burton setting for a movie, but terrible for everything else. The problem, especially for municipalities, is because the Siberian elm, while it's not really resistant, it's more like tolerant. So they can still become infected, which means that they can actually act as a disease sink to pass the fungus to other trees, to other elm trees in the area, if you've got obviously beetles. And so that's one of the concerns for us with having trying to preserve because so for us, we've got about 3,500 elm trees, and a third of those are over 75 centimeters DBH. So that's 30-inch DBH. So very, very significant trees when it comes to canopy. So that's the one thing about the Siberian elm. And I can't stress enough that they're horrible trees. The other thing is the province is once again doing their DED survey. And so they welcome any suspect elm samples. I can share the methodology that they published last year to collect the samples and send them over to them if anybody wants it.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. We'd be happy to send that out to all the registrants here too. So
okay, I'll send it to you.
And thank you, Sophie, for the additional information about Siberian elm there. Yes, and that's an important distinction to make. I've sort of described it in the past as kind of a typhoid Mary in that it can carry, but generally doesn't show symptoms and in a way can actually encourage spread through that. So thank you for making that clarification.
Graham, there is one question here for you from Parm Deep. What's the plan to ID trees on BC roadways this year?
That's an excellent question. So, and a difficult one. Trees have for a long time been kind of ignored, at least on our roadways, or invasive trees, I should say, because of the challenges that I mentioned, right? They're difficult to manage sort of at scale. So typically the way we're managing them right now is through our brushing operations, right? And that is mostly as kind of a safety issue and a sightline issue, not for management of the species as kind of an invasive concern. So they've been largely ignored. We are working on improving that inventory. Although it's just challenging, to dedicate time to that inventory, keeping in mind all the other priorities that we do have. It's extremely early days, but I am kind of interested in exploring, possible like AI methods or sort of using like visual imagery to assist in that process. But but it's very, very early days yet.
Awesome. Thanks, Graham.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Graham, for that great presentation. I don't think we have any more questions here, so I think maybe we'll just start our break a little bit early. So if everybody could plan to come back for 10:35, we'll start back up with the rest of our presentations then.
Looks good, Dan. I think I don't know if your audio is joined in, Dan. I don't know if you're muted or if you joined the audio for Zoom.
Okay, welcome back from our break, everybody. I think we'll get started here again. So we've got Dan Maja here from the Regional District of Central Okanagan, and can start your presentation whenever you're ready, Dan.
First and foremost, can people see my screen? It says I'm screen sharing, but I don't see it myself.
I can
sure
see your
can.
screen. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. It's been an interesting morning so far, and it was interesting to get the fan out about the Japanese butterbird plant yesterday, and all these interesting things to look forward to. Anyway, so our noxious weed bylaw, I'll get right into it. Local governments, obviously, we can enact different bylaws for regional districts. Not only can we enact bylaws, we extend our letters patent to allow for certain types of enforcement. Our weed bylaw has been in place for decades, obviously adopted to protect agriculture. Kelowna, the Okanagan, has always been agriculture intensive. While some of that fruit orchards have changed to wine and grapes, it's still very agriculture forward. So we decided to add a couple of things last year. Tree of Heaven, Russian Olive, Siberian Elm. It's been interesting to hear all three of them discussed today. So we added them to our weed control or noxious weed bylaw. We've identified them as noxious plants and not necessarily noxious weeds, but noxious plants. And we'll get into the legislation that allows us to do that in a little bit. We also added the ability to use herbicides. Up to this point, herbicides have not been permitted to be used in regional districts or in our regional district. However, recognizing that the best practice sometimes involves an herbicide, we felt it was important to get that added into the bylaw as well, so that our contractor or even our parks department, as we're trying to remove these three things from our area, that we have all the tools in our toolbox to do that. Very interesting to hear about the disposal of the Dutch elm disease trees, as well as the green ash borer trees too. So really, this has been a great learning experience for me, and I appreciate the sharing that goes on here. Oh, there we go. So in addition to the weed bylaw updates, we added a surcharge. So especially with Tree of Heaven, we go back to a property 3, 4, sometimes 5 times to ensure that the work was done and completed to our satisfaction, and that we are able to send the bill to the property owners. We have shifted currently we use glyphosate, and that has been, we're hoping, we're going to find out this year how successful it was. We also got the little capsules, the little 22 shells full of glyphosate to use on some of the trees this year, just trying to minimize environmental impact to surrounding areas, wildlife, kids, people. So I'm really excited about this year and what successes we may have. Because it's direct enforcement, if people don't pay their bill, we can bill them. It gets put on their property taxes. We're a regional district. The province collects our fees for us, and then it gets remitted to us through a tax transfer. Oh, every time I touch that screen, this one. So again, under the Local Government Act, we have the ability to charge fees for work done on land for improvements. We also have a fire alarm bylaw, but we're entitled to recover costs for work done and for services provided. Community charter, very similar. Some of it pertains to us, but this more reflects what municipality or so city abilities are. Again, those who are working within these pieces of legislation are well aware of what your authorities are. And then, of course, our ability or our authority to enter into lands to ensure that bylaws are being complied with. Nuisances, which is what we're using for Tree of Heaven, is under 325. The board may require owners, and again, noxious weeds, other growths, and brush trees. It's all in the same section, which is where our bylaw gets its authorities. While we have named Tree of Heaven, Siberian elm, and Russian olive, our focus currently is on Tree of Heaven because that one has the more direct agricultural impact. If spotted lanternfly gets to the Okanagan, we could see a devastating impact to our local agricultural economy. So, and I also want to be mindful that Siberian elm, or a number of different species of elm, were planted in a lot of our parks and public spaces. They took no effort to grow, didn't have to water them all the time, so they have become a large part of our urban canopy. And our focus is to try and start replacing that urban canopy before we really start to get people to remove the Siberian elms. 418 under the Local Government Act is, again, that's where we can bill the homeowners and recover the costs as a debt. And then 419 is our authority to inspect. So why Tree of Heaven removal? Obviously, I think a lot of us have thought about this since we kind of heard about it a few years ago. It's listed under the Canadian Food Inspection Agency as an invasive, well, the Tree of Heaven is an invasive plant. Spotted lanternfly is an invasive insect. Hopefully we can get a hold of it. I know Okanagan Regional District of South Okanagan is doing a lot of work to remove Tree of Heaven as well. The agricultural impact is really our focus, and hopefully we have some success. These are a couple properties where we sent out tree orders, so we'll send out an order. I'll show you an example of that in the next couple of slides. But this is what we see on properties here and what we're looking to contain. Sometimes they're on property lines, sometimes they're on public property. The public property, the City of Kelowna, our Parks Department have been very collaborative in removing it from properties that we identify. Again, this is a team effort. This is everybody trying to buy into it. The shocking thing that I've found is we've had much better public buy-in than I anticipated, and we'll get into some numbers shortly here. But we cut down all Tree of Heaven. Doesn't matter how big, how small. If it's identified as Tree of Heaven, it is required to be cut down and treated to try and keep it from coming back. As we all know, it grows crazily through the roots. Usually you cut it and it just becomes like a hydra, where you cut off one head, eight shall return. So that unfortunately is where the glyphosate or triclopyr is key. So total complaints. In 2024, when we added it to the bylaw, we took a education approach. As we got calls about them, we attended, we talked to property owners, we sent letters advising of the Tree of Heaven and what their responsibilities are. 2025, we actually took action and sent orders, much like we've been doing with weed orders for, again, 30 plus years. Total complaints we had in our weed bylaw, or our weed bylaw enforcement for 2025, 623. We had 204 Tree of Heaven complaints. 150 of those were cut by the owner, which is fantastic. We only had to cut 54, which I thought was, I think that's a great example of the public understanding that this is a challenge. Sometimes we would tag the tree for private property owners. Sometimes it was obvious where the tree was. We met owners, we advised them what to look for. We have a leaflet that goes out with our orders, showing pictures, difference between a sumac, difference between a tree of heaven, what to look for, and then what the expectations are. We reference the Invasive Species Council's best practice website so that people are getting the information from industry experts and not just hearing it from us. We want them to follow as we find better methods. If we find better methods, I want to be referring them to where industry experts are having conversations and updating those plans, as opposed to just listening to me. That's an example of our order letter. Again, very simple. We've done an inspection of your property. You have tree of heaven. You're required to remove it. Under the legislation, we are required to give 10 days. Obviously, sometimes with the lack of arborists, if it's a bigger tree or what have you, if people phone and ask for an extension, we do give extensions strictly because we want property owners to be removing it more than us. And again, we seem to have had some fairly good success with buy-in from the public. This is one of the ones that we had to do ourselves, rather large established tree. And of course we have a professional arborist doing that work, not just our staff. They get marked, they get sprayed, and I'm hoping that we see a lot of the work we did last year being successful, and I hope it has an impact on any new regrowth this year. The contractor did mechanical removal and then treated, and we posted our signs. Again, we had to, because we're lucky we only used glyphosate. I didn't have to store it myself. The contractor was a pesticide applicator, so he was able to store it. I did have to go through an audit with the ministry on my pesticide use under my pesticide license, which allowed us to buy certain things. And luckily we passed. I shouldn't say luckily, I expected to pass, but you just never know. This is our first year using pesticides, so it was a big learning curve. I learned a lot. I hope my staff learned a lot, and I hope the public learned a lot. This year we're adding something. So if we're going to be telling people to remove trees, we want them to replace trees. So the city of Kelowna, who has developed their own greenery, have agreed to partner with us, and we're going to be buying trees from them at a reduced cost for people who remove a tree of heaven with a trunk size of more than 10 centimeters DBH. We're going to be giving them a replacement tree to place in its place. And I hope that will help encourage people to do it and help restore that urban canopy that we're losing. Because while they're an invasive tree, they are contributing to that urban canopy that helps keep us shaded, a little bit cooler, provide oxygen. But of course, we want native, non-invasive species growing as opposed to these. Any questions? I love the fact that this picture has a tree of heaven in it. I don't know if that was deliberate or accidental, but anyway. Do I see any questions?
Dan, I do have a question for you here.
Sure.
This is referring to the public buy-in. Like, was there something specific that you noticed as to why you think there was such high buy-in from the public on this program?
I think part of it is in the board report when we had the board adopt it. The board was quite vocal about the challenge this tree could impose on our area. And I think just the politicians speaking out so strongly against it that it helped. I know the people would love us to address Siberian elm a lot more because of the elm leaf beetle and the lovely nuisance that they create for us every spring. But when you have limited resources, and we all have limited resources, I wanted to ensure that we targeted one that actually was an impact agriculture before we started tackling the other two. Siberian or Russian olive would actually probably be my second choice to go after, but currently we're going to focus on Tree of Heaven. Hopefully we can get a handle on it because it's amazing how much you see it when you know what it is. You can't drive anywhere without seeing it. Yeah, did that
Awesome.
answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I think the educational component, we sent out a lot of information through our comms team. We always send these letters to the property owners who we're sending them the order. And I think once they read up on it and they realize the problem that it can be, I think people are well educated. You always have pushback from certain people. It was tough for people who that was the only tree on their property. The gentleman in the pictures, he had to remove 7 big established trees. And so it basically removed most of his shade. So he pushed back a bit, but at the end, we ended up cutting him down.
Awesome. And kind of more in the perspective of some of the municipal employees or municipalities that are interested in developing a similar bylaw, what would be your 2 or 3 pieces of wisdom or recommendations for those folks?
The public engagement or like public consultation, I don't even know if public consultation is the right word. The education, really focus on educating the public as to why this is a challenging species that we need to get rid of. It really helps that when we can reference to, Invasive Species Council of BC website, Canada website, all these others, we can point to Pennsylvania. When people are able to do their own research and they can see the dramatic impacts, I think that is where you sell the public. Give them the information so that they can realize that this is a problem. And there are much better options. I know I planted 2 fractious trees on my campsite before I saw Troy's presentation last year and went, oh no, what did I just do? But I'm hoping I'm remote enough that I don't ever see the emerald ash borer there. But yeah, and then for us, we partner. Obviously, we run the weed program for our entire regional district. So my municipal partners, I'm hoping to sign up West Kelowna this year, but I have Kelowna, Peachland, Lake Country, and then of course our electoral areas. So they're all covered. We do all that work for them, and which is why Kelowna is quite happy to partner with us to help replace trees for that urban canopy impact that we're creating.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Cool.
If we don't have any more questions coming in there, I don't think so. So yeah, thank you so much, Dan, for that great presentation.
So I
It's very
will stop share.
interesting.
Yeah. Any
And
questions, feel free to reach out.
awesome. Thank you. So next we'll have Troy from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency present on 2 new emerging invasive pests.
How does that look, Camille?
Looks great.
Okay, cool. I'll get going here. So yeah, hi. My name's Troy. I'm an entomologist, survey biologist with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. My main job is to develop survey protocols, procedures for regulated plant pests. And today I'm going to talk about kind of 2 emerging non-native insects. One's been found in Canada and in BC, and the other one's not known to occur. So the first one I'm going to talk about is horse chestnut leaf miner. This is a moth, and it belongs to a family of moths called leaf blotch miners. Pretty sexy name. This particular insect, it's the adult moth isn't that big. It's only about half a centimeter long, so about quarter of an inch. Wingspan's about the same. Um, there they there are some that do look similar to this in North America, but in general, Camararia is this genus of moth. This one in particular, you can tell it's got sort of like a brownish main body, and then there's four white stripes, and you can see them here on the photo on the right there. It's a white stripe with sort of like a black line at the base, and there's one, two, three, four of them. And there's also like a V or a U-shaped white patch close to the head as well. Just a way to kind of recognize the adult moth there. Larvae, I don't know, just looks like another typical legless larvae there. Um, this insect is native to the Balkans. Um, it's kind of originally just native to like Albania, Macedonia area, and then has since kind of spread throughout much of Europe and to other spots. Here's a map here just kind of showing you the native range, which I find very interesting. It's only, a couple countries. Macedonia, you got Albania there. Then and since it's spread throughout a good chunk of Europe. What happens in the life cycle is that these adult moths they merge end of April, kind of early May, around the same time that horse chestnut begins to flower. Um, Insects, these females seem to kind of prefer to lay their eggs on lower leaves first, and then as those spots get kind of filled up, they move upwards in the canopy and start laying eggs higher and higher up in the canopy. Roughly, you got a pretty palmate leaf there, right? It's got like five, six lobes on it or so. You can get 100 eggs laid on one leaf there. Not all by one female. Most females only lay about 20 to 40 eggs each. So the eggs are laid right on top of the leaf, and then the larvae kind of nicks its way, cuts the epidermis, and then moves in between the two layers of epidermis and feeds within the leaf there. Um, yeah, at first the mines are kind of clearish, so you can see on the bottom photograph there, you can see some darker spots, and that's when the gallery is older. But you can see the lighter damage to the leaf, and those are kind of the initial stages of larval development there. So they kind of translucent, kind of clear to begin with, and then they sort of become more opaque, and then they darken up and they actually brown up over time. And roughly June-ish, July, you can start to see if a tree is infested, you can see the much darker, browner galleries there. Um, what happens is that you get a few generations per year. Um, in warmer spots, there probably in the Balkans and the Mediterranean, you might get 5 generations a year. Likely in colder spots, you're looking at much fewer generations. Um, Come the fall, uh, this insect overwinters as a pupa. So they're within the epidermis and they don't emerge. The leaf falls and then they just kind of overwinter in the leaf litter. Its main host is horse chestnut, specifically the European horse chestnut that's native to the area that the insect is also native from. It can go after other chestnut species as well. So, Japanese horse chestnut, Indian, those are all known hosts for this particular moth. Also, the North American red buckeye there. also a known host. Can also attack Norway maple and sycamore, two maple species. And for all of these hosts, including the European horse chestnut, the main host, there's not really, like significant impacts to any of the hosts. I'm going to show you some photos later on, and you're going to say, "Whoa, that looks like severe defoliation." But for some reason, this insect is not a doesn't cause huge impact to any of its hosts. So although it does go after chestnuts, it only goes after horse chestnuts, trees in the Aesculus genus, and it doesn't actually go after sweet chestnut, any Castanea. So here's a couple photographs. So this is when the egg is hatched. The larvae actually nicks and creates a little slit and enters into the leaf between the two layer between the top epidermis and the bottom epidermis. You can actually see in both photographs there that each larvae has started to kind of mine and consume. It looks like the chlorophyll in there, and then you can see particularly with the image on the left, fairly new gallery, and you can see it's kind of translucent. It hasn't really darkened up yet. You can see a little bit of frass that's left behind as well. Um, so I mentioned there can be multiple generations per year. When the last instar is going to get ready to pupate, that larvae actually creates a little nick through the epidermis, and then that's where it's going to pupate. And then takes a few days. Adults emerge, and you can actually see the empty puparium left behind, stuck within the epidermis of the leaf. Here's some more additional pictures of some galleries. You can see that these are a lot older. They've darkened up and they become quite brown over time. And then you can see these kind of gray patches here. And these are actually holes where the last instar chewed a little slit, and this is where the pupa and the adult emerge from there. Just more additional photographs here. The one on the left just kind of shows you the initiation of these leaf mines, these leaf galleries, translucent to begin with, and then they darken up over time. A fairly light infestation, and then the photograph on the right, you can see that there's a lot more eggs laid on this particular leaf here. Um, Now, sometimes you can get leaf spots, and I think the one here in the photograph is a European leaf spot, but they are kind of similar. I think the ones in North America, I think they're in the same genus, but the leaf spots kind of look similar. You might have dark brown discoloring of the leaf, kind of similar to an older horse chestnut leaf miner mine. But the difference with the leaf spot is that they always kind of have this yellow band, a dark yellow band surrounding the perimeter of the leaf spot. Whereas if we go back to the mines, you don't have that yellow perimeter surrounding the moth mines there. And in the photograph on the right, you can see it's primarily leaf spot. And then you do have a bit of horse chestnut leaf miner, a couple mines there, and there as well. So, I mentioned earlier on that this insect is a defoliator, but it doesn't cause really any big impact to its host. And you look at this photograph and you're like, holy smokes, that's all the leaves are brown. The trees don't look good. It's in the summertime. All those horse chestnut leaves should be green. But yeah, the damage is apparently worse than it looks. And even when you get severe defoliation like that, like what you see in this photograph, even if it happens a couple years in a row, there doesn't seem to be any big impact to the tree. You don't get any reduction in radial growth. Really no mortality. There might be a little bit of branch dieback there. It does look like the crowns are thinning a little bit there, but in general, it's it's not a pest. Um, and yeah, I'm just surprised by that. Um, as far as, control, what you can do to kind of manage this insect in urban areas is, one thing you can do is they do overwinter as pupae in the leaf litter. So in the fall you can rake that all up and you can mulch it or burn it. That way, destroying any of the life stages within the leaf. There are some known trunk injections that are effective against the leaf miner. I don't think anything's been registered in Canada yet, but I might be wrong. So a lot of this work is done over in Europe there. Um, yeah, so I mentioned at the beginning, two of the insects I'm going to talk about today. One is established in BC, and this is the one here. So around 2023, there were some reports of suspect horse-chestnut leaf miner in North Vancouver. We actually went out, collected some specimens, had the larvae, and we had the larvae both molecularly and morphologically identified. So we did confirm it last year. And since then, in addition to North Vancouver, it's also been found in Vancouver, New West, Burnaby, Delta, and Port Coquitlam. Um, so not only is this a new provincial record, it's a new Canadian record, and it's also a new American record. Currently, it's not known to occur anywhere else in North America. There have been no U.S. reports, but it could, there is a native Camararia out east, and it is possible that because it causes, similar signs and symptoms, also goes after the same host, perhaps it is being missed out east. Um, and because it's not a doesn't have a big impact on its host, um, Canadian Food Inspection Agency is not regulating this insect. So next steps, I'm not sure what's going to happen because it's not regulated by us. We won't be doing any surveys. So yeah, I'm not sure where it's going to go from here. The second insect I want to talk about, and this is not known to occur in BC or anywhere in Canada. It's called the Mediterranean oak borer, and this thing it's quite tiny too. It's only about 3 millimeters long, so just over a quarter of an inch. It is an ambrosia beetle, so unlike emerald ash borer, where you have like the larvae that feed within the cambial layer, they feed on the phloem. Um, what happens with all ambrosia beetles is females will create an egg gallery, usually within the sapwood. They lay eggs along that gallery. Eggs emerge. Larvae start creating their own gallery, but the larvae aren't actually feeding on the wood. What happens is that this particular insect, it varies, it vectors or carries a um, a fungus that's pathogenic to the tree, and it's actually the fungus that the immature the larval beetles feed on the fungus. So Mediterranean oak borer, it's essentially a farmer, and it's essentially a mushroom farmer. So it's growing basically mushrooms for its young to feed on. Like a lot of ambrosia beetles, these things kind of one of the first sort of wood-borne insects to emerge early in spring. So you can start to get emergence around April, with peak flight kind of occurring late spring there in May and June. Takes about 5 to 8 weeks for um, it to complete its life cycle. So 5 to 8 weeks to go from an egg to an adult. So in a lot of areas where in its native range, probably has about two generations a year. Um, and it's native, just like the horse chestnut leaf miner. It's actually native to the Mediterranean and Middle East area. Over there, the oak borer attacks really unhealthy and dying oak, and occasionally it does attack beech. Um, I've been doing some collaborative work with the National Forest Research Agency in Slovakia. I've been working with them since about 2008. I get them to test Canadian-made traps and lures, and they test them in Slovakia to see what types of European woodborne insects they pick up. So I know what our lures and traps are going to target when we deploy them here. And talking to them, we've actually caught Mediterranean oak borer in some of the work that we've done. And over in Slovakia, this it's not a pest at all. It really just attacks kind of weakened, dying, stressed oaks in the forest there. So this European Middle Eastern insect, um, it was first found in North America, in California in 2018. They actually found this insect attacking and colonizing oak trees in California. About three years later, it was officially found in Oregon. They had caught it in traps a couple times, around the same time that it was officially detected in California. But they couldn't confirm its presence and establishment, i.e., it was actually completing life cycles in established trees until 2022. So you got California and Oregon are known to be infested, and it's also been reported from Korea. In California and Oregon, what's a bit alarming is that it does go after unhealthy oak just like it does in its native territory, but it is also attacking healthy oaks as well in both states. And interesting enough, um, I've listed the counties here in Oregon and California that have known infestations of the oak borer. The counties that I've highlighted in yellow, those are actually wine-growing counties in both Oregon and California. And we're not sure, people aren't sure how the Mediterranean oak borer was introduced into the United States, but we're kind of guessing, with the proximity discovery within these wine growing areas. There's a hypothesis that it could have been untreated oak staves, pieces of oak wood. They were untreated. They weren't treated with insecticides or fumigated or heat treated. And it's possible that those pieces of oak were harboring Mediterranean oak borer life stages, and that's how it was introduced into California and Oregon. So, in the United States, it is attacking oaks in both the white oak group and the red oak group. Within red oaks, the one that we're kind of concerned about is northern red oak. It is planted up here in Canada as a street tree. It also in both Washington and Oregon and California, it also goes after trees in the oak group. The one that we're really concerned about is Gary oak. This is a tree that has limited distribution in BC, kind of restricted to the southwest corner of this province. Apparently, there is a few trees at the south end of the Fraser Valley, just outside of Hope. I haven't seen those. But what we're concerned about is the threatened Gary Oak ecosystem on the Sandwich Peninsula, just in the Greater Victoria area. So we're concerned about that. Signs and symptoms of oak borer. I mentioned it is the disease, it is the fungus that's associated with it that's harmful to the tree. It can clog up the xylem and the phloem, so it can restrict the movement of nutrients and water up and down the tree. So when you do get an infestation and you do get infection with the fungus, you can start to get some branch dieback. Leaves can start to turn yellowish, red, brown over time. Similar to emerald ash borer, this thing kind of starts higher up in the crown and then kind of moves downwards. If you have infested branches or infested bolts, logs, you cut them in cross section, you can actually see where the fungus has infected all the larval tunnels. So the larval tunnels or the galleries created by the insect will be lined with a black fungus. And you can see that within the sapwood. It doesn't really this insect, like a lot of ambrosia beetles, they don't necessarily go into the heartwood to kind of stay in the sapwood a bit there. Another sign of attack, not specific to Mediterranean oak borer, but a common sign with a lot of ambrosia beetles is that they're going to produce like a yellowish white granular frass. So things that like bark beetles, Douglas fir beetle, which doesn't penetrate into the sapwood, the frass that it ejects is kind of more like a brownish, darker frass. Same with mountain pine beetles. But in this case, because it's actually going into the sapwood, the frass, the wood, the waste wood that it's ejecting is kind of a lighter color, similar to the color of the sapwood, and you can see that at the base. So next couple photographs, we'll show you these signs here. So you got this white granular frass, kind of looks like granulated garlic. You can get perfectly round exit holes that occur. These are very, very tiny. They're only about a quarter of an inch in diameter, 1.5 mils. Here's a cross section of a log there, and you can see these dark tunnels here, and those are all lined with the fungus there, and you can see that it's just kind of restricted to the sapwood. You get the odd one kind of penetrating into the heartwood there, but for the most part, the galleries are just kind of confined to the sapwood area. Um, what can you do? We don't Mediterranean oak borer is not known to be up here, but there's a chance that it could eventually be introduced. So things that you can do to kind of reduce the impact of this ambrosia beetle and to try to maintain oak in your landscape. Uh, this insect, it does like to attack stressed and unhealthy, weakened trees. So, what you can try to do are things to prevent that from happening. So, you can reduce water drought stress by watering your oak trees. You can try to reduce mechanical damage, wounding that can happen to a tree. A lot of ambrosia beetles they can cue in on wounded areas, especially if the wounded area leads to a bit more damage throughout the tree. So if you can try to avoid reduce constructions, try to minimize building roads in and around oaks. That's going to try to keep your trees a bit healthier there. Ambrosia beetles can also attack, weaken stress branches as well. So, doing some prevented pruning is a good way to remove, suspect material. Plus, if you do some active pruning too, you can kind of control the way that branches break, and you're not going to get like a nasty branch break that might just rip off more bark, create a bit more stress to that general area. There are some systemic insecticides that are registered in Canada, but because this insect's not up here yet, there's nothing registered for this insect up here. Additional management methods for this critter. You do have infested logs, wood. You can chip it, you can burn it, and the big thing for all wood-borne insects, just want to try to limit the spread, slow the spread of this insect. Just don't move firewood, right? Buy local, burn local. So what are we doing? What are the next steps? So uh, I don't think this insect is regulated by CFIA yet, but as far as follow-ups, we are concerned about the Garry Oak ecosystem in the Sandwich Peninsula. So our CFIA office in Victoria, they're going to set some funnel traps, um, either up in the wine growing areas in central Saanich. They will target the wine growing areas only if there is Garry Oak up there. If there's no Garry Oak anywhere near a winery, really no point out, putting out the traps. We could put out a trap and see if maybe that winery is bringing in untreated staves, but that's a bit more of a wild goose chase. So what they would do, if there's any wineries that have some oak growing around it there, they will put some traps there. If not, further south, as you get close to downtown Victoria, there's quite a bit of Gary oak, and the Victoria office, they might put some traps kind of in industrial commercial areas where wood packaging, it could bring in untreated oak wood packaging, and that could harbor Mediterranean oak borer as well. So we're going to follow it up with some trapping this year, and also continued trapping the following year as well. With respect to Mediterranean oak borer, if you think you have an oak tree that might be attacked by this particular insect, try to collect the beetle. If you do find a beetle, you can put it in a vial. If you have some ethanol, that's great. Put a little bit of ethanol in there. Don't use rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide. Those two chemicals, although they can preserve specimens, they make them super, super brittle. So difficult for our lab staff to kind of handle and all that. So if you got a vial, no ethanol, just put the bug in the vial, pop it in the freezer. That will kill the beetle. Make sure you collect any information about where you got that insect, date, GPS, little pinpoint on Google there. If you know the species of the oak tree, that'd be great. If you don't find the beetle, but you think you might have an infested oak, maybe there is some coarse yellowish granular frass at the base, or you have some very small circular exit holes on it, but you can't find an adult, can't find any larvae. You can still collect information on that infested oak. Take a photograph. If there is a branch that is red or brown, and you're able to obtain that, um, we might be able to do some diagnostics to determine if the fungus that's in there is the one that's vectored by the oak borer. If you do want to go that route, just give me a call, and we can talk about procedures before we actually go out and collect any branches. Yeah, and if you have any suspect beetles or suspect images about this particular critter, just feel free to email me. Um, Address is down below. You can also text me on my cell. You could also contact any of our CFIA offices here in Southwest British Columbia: Abbotsford, Surrey, Burnaby, Victoria, Parksville, Kelowna. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys' attention.
Thank you, Troy. That was very interesting to hear about those two new emerging insects. If anybody has any questions, please just put them into the Q&A box there.
We do have one question here for you, Troy. In regards to the Mediterranean oak borer, how worried are we about the oak borer reaching BC, as Washington is still a barrier between Oregon and BC?
Sorry. I'm trying to I'm trying to get out of here. Yeah. Could you
I'll give you a
repeat the
sec. I'll give you a
question?
second. Yeah.
How do I
Um,
stop share? Oh, there it is. Okay, there. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, the question is just kind of how worried are we about the Mediterranean oak borer coming up from the States, I guess, since Oregon is still a barrier between Washington and into BC. Or sorry, Washington is a barrier from Oregon into BC.
Yeah, I mean, at the international border, um, people coming into Canada should be asked questions, about what they're bringing in, and hopefully people declare that they are bringing up firewood, and that will then be confiscated at the border, or hopefully the Canadian Border Services Agency staff, hopefully they ask the questions if people are bringing firewood up into Canada, but that remains with them, and that's their jurisdiction. So even though there is, a big gap between Portland, Oregon, where it's found, kind of Portland, Oregon-ish area, there's still a possibility that firewood could be moved.
Awesome, Troy. And there's a second part of that question, kind of more considering our own industry in BC. Given the wine staves vector, would you suggest that we start talking to the wineries and vineyards in BC to keep an eye out for them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the wineries themselves aren't going to be concerned about the oak borer impacting their crop, because it only goes after oak. But, it would be valuable if wineries did inspect some of their wood staves, if they import them from Europe, or they even import them from Oregon or California. If there's any small round black pinholes, 1.5 millimeters in diameter, if they see any of the pinholes or any of the staining, it would be great to have some type of outreach program and communication program where wineries do reach out, contact someone, whether it's us or ISCBC or BC Ministry of Agriculture, or I think it would be good to kind of, do some outreach and let those growers know for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And one more question for you, Troy. Unrelated to, not totally unrelated to your presentation, but someone was wondering what's happening in your background there. The background picture.
So that's good. I was hoping that picture would pop up and not my laundry room here. I got a bunch of towels hanging beside. So that's hemlock woolly adelgid. So those white dots that you see on that tree, that's what's called an ovisac. And within each of those white rounded dots is a single female, and she lays about 20 to 40 eggs. Um, the little aphid-like insect emerges, crawls around on the branch, finds another spot to hunker down. It sticks its stylet into the tree. Once it does that, she doesn't move, and then she starts to produce the white mass, and then she starts to lay eggs. This insect is native to North America, Western North America. So from southern Alaska all the way to northern California, this insect is native. It's co-evolved with western and mountain hemlock since the last ice age. And here it's not a pest. I've never, ever, 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 ever had to study it. I've been doing forest entomology for 30 years, and it's not a pest here in British Columbia. When I did my master's up at Simon Fraser University, we took a whole bunch of forest entomology courses. We never even talked about this one, period. So, what happened is in the early 1900s, this insect also occurs in Japan. It occurs throughout the whole kind of Pacific Rim area. So it occurs in Korea, Eastern China, as well as Japan. The Japanese strain of this insect was introduced into Virginia, and because the Carolinian and Eastern hemlocks out east didn't co-evolve with this adelgid, they're just not used to it, and the adelgid is wiping out massive stands of Eastern and Carolina hemlock out east. It's been introduced into Nova Scotia, where it's killing hundreds of Eastern hemlocks, primarily in southern Nova Scotia. So my job, I work with Cornell. Cornell comes out here. We collect predators that are also native here, and we ship the predators out east. Release the predators out in their hemlock forest there to try to do biocontrol. So yeah, that's what's behind me there.
Awesome. Thanks, Troy.
Cool. Okay, thanks for that extra little bit, Troy. I think now we will move on to the facilitated portion unless there's any other questions. I don't think there's anything else there. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Mm. Is that visible for everybody there?
Yeah, looks good, Camille.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we just have a few questions here in Mentimeter. You can join the Mentimeter by scanning the QR code there in the corner with your phone. Or you can also just go to mentimeter.com and type in that code there. So I'll just give everybody a second to join. I see we already have one response there. So the first two questions here are going to be multiple choice questions just to help us gather some information. We're currently running a project for the Ministry of Agriculture and Foods, which aims to complete an inventory of key tree species like ash, elm, tree of heaven that are impacted by some of the invasive pests that we talked about here today. We've been collecting existing data sets from local governments to help build this database using a survey that I'll share again at the end of this webinar. So this question's just if you have a tree inventory already existing for your community. If you don't know or if that's not applicable, you can just check it there. And then there's an option for an inventory for private land only, or if you have an inventory for public lands as well. Seems like for most people not applicable. Great, thank you for voting on that one. Leave it for another second. Okay, moving on to the next question here is another multiple choice. Do you have any staff members in your government or organization that can identify trees? Just helpful to know if any gaps exist in data due to lack of resources for tree identification. Looks like most people have at least one staff member that is trained in tree identification. So that's good to know that that maybe is not a huge barrier to some people. Move on to the more open-ended questions we have here. That's sort of to simulate some discussion. I think there's a word limit for these questions, so feel free to expand on anything in the chat, and maybe Torin can just take a look at the chat and mention if anything comes up there too. This question is, what resources or information would be useful to have for urban trees, invasive pests, and diseases? For example, like tree or pest ID guides, best management practices, tree inventories or canopy maps, or monitoring protocols. More funding, yeah. I imagine that's probably a would be the most useful resource to have for most people. A pest ID guide. We are also currently developing an identification guide for ash and elm trees that will be coming out soon. Best management practices as well. Funding again. Local ID guides to BC or the Pacific Northwest is a good idea. pest ID information. Yeah. A mailing list for updates to BMPs, emerging pests. It's an interesting idea. Did anything else come up in the chat, Torin?
Not right now. Nope.
Okay.
I'll be sure to let you know.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you for your answers. And we'll move on to tree inventory, handheld molecular tree ID kits that are not that expensive and fast. That's pretty interesting. I think that'd be a cool way to develop a tree inventory for sure. Another open question here. What are the major barriers to understanding, mapping, recording, or managing trees and tree pests in your community? I know that was already mentioned. Funding would be a useful resource to have. If there's any other barriers, for example, data or knowledge gaps, ID challenges like lack of resources or trained staff, or jurisdictional constraints. Staff capacity is mentioned here for sure. We're a large local government and getting the inventory completed is a massive project. Yeah, I anticipate that that is probably a huge amount of work for some local governments, probably regardless of size too. Scope and monitoring, hard to cover large forested areas until pests have already established. Yeah, that's a good point. And funding again, yeah. Trees on private lands. We also have an iNaturalist project going along with our survey where folks can submit reports of ash or elm or tree of heaven or Russian olive that are on their private lands to help us get a better idea of where those trees exist for management considerations. Maybe we can share that link to the iNaturalist project at the end as well. Lack of funding and political will, easily available and inexpensive mapping and inventory software. Yeah. Community science or private land ties in with that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your answers there. Another multiple choice question here. What are your top priorities for future information on urban pests and diseases? Are online resources most useful? Workshops and webinars, kind of like this one, working groups on specific trees or pests, or if you have another idea, maybe you could share the details of that in the chat. Seems like a few people think that the working groups are a top priority for sure. It's definitely been successful for something like Japanese beetle in the past and currently still. Good to know that the webinars are useful. Okay, I'll move on to the last one here. Another open question. If you have any other recommendations, next steps, or other invasive species of concern in your community, maybe the ones that we didn't mention here today, let us know.
Camille, there's a couple other notes here in the chat.
Okay.
One is about listening to a lot of podcasts. So podcasts as a potential resource for folks. And it would be interesting to use iNaturalist for tree inventories. To be able to take photos and develop it through the third-party app would be helpful. That was from Dan.
Yeah, those are great ideas. I love podcast idea. And yeah, iNaturalist for sure. It's a great way to get that information for inventories on private lands, I think. Keep sharing information, challenges, and successes. City bark disease, yeah. Thank you. Uh, see if anything else comes up here. Maybe if you mention invasive species like city bark disease, just curious to know what your location is or where that has been an issue for you. Definitely contact CFIA if you suspect there could be spotted lanternfly in your area, since that is not known to be in BC or quite near BC yet, or Canada.
Comment in the chat here, Camille, just to kind of reinforce the invasive species, and maybe it's just speaking to more push for resources around Norway maple. And Daryl, please do confirm that if you'd like in the chat. But other invasive trees like Norway maple, there's also 3 garden escape shrubs that have naturalized over large areas in the North Okanagan, Kalamaka Lake, Provincial Park, such as common privet, European barberry, and dog rose. So lots of things that can be pushed out, I suppose, as other resources, whether or not they're invasive or issues that are becoming naturalized in areas like the North Okanagan.
For sure. And any of our speakers here, feel free to jump in with your thoughts on this if you have any. I think you can unmute and hear.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep sharing what our program achieves. I mean, if we do get some good successes, it's nice to share successes. And then of course challenges if we get pushed when we get pushback from private property owners and how we work through those. I'm happy to share those challenges in the future as well. This is a team effort. While I'm focused on the central Okanagan, I recognize that it's not limited to my area. And so if what we do here helps somebody else, because I'm going to steal what works for you guys for my area as well. I agree with the ISCBC doing a great job, because I'm learning about things and hearing about things sooner than I ever anticipated. So I appreciate the help, and I plan to help as well.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, definitely some good groundwork and protocols that you have there that I think could be applied to other management of other trees. Revamp and grow the local government network. Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, if that's my last question there, and the last thing just wanted to share is just switch to sharing. Is this showing the QR code, or is it still showing the Mentimeter?
It's still showing the Mentimeter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can scan this QR code here. Oops. That will take you to the survey that I mentioned earlier, where I'm sure a lot of people here have already submitted that survey, I've heard about it already. But if you haven't and you have tree inventory to share, it would be a great help if you're able to submit that through the survey here. Troy, I see your hand raised. Go ahead with
Yeah, hey Camille,
microphone.
I try to put I don't know how to share a photo with everyone. I couldn't insert a photo into the Q&A. So I put a photo of that maroon emerald ash borer into the panelist chat. I don't know if you can pop that out and send it to the group.
I think I can share it on my screen here. I have it open too because I was looking at that. Is that visible to everyone there?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Troy. Super interesting. I mentioned earlier about the ID that, well, the main ID feature is that they're this metallic emerald color, but obviously that's not always the case because there's
Yeah, but
this.
it's like 1 in 4 quadrillion that you like. I've actually never saw that specimen. I've never seen anything like that. I was one of the first, I was like the eighth Canadian to see emerald ash borer in Windsor when it was found in '02. I've seen EAB in a lot of provinces. I've never seen anything like that. And those insects were actually morphologically identified by our lab, by experts, and it is emerald ash borer. It's just a weird, funky color. So I don't think anybody's ever going to see it, but it's just kind of a cool thing. So I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, super cool. Rare specimen. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, I will stop sharing here. Thanks for sharing that link to the survey in the chat there. So yeah, well, thank you to all of our presenters for sharing with us today. It was great presentations and great discussion. We will be sharing this recording on our YouTube page, and I think I've also received from Sophie the Dutch elm disease sampling protocol that can be shared with our participant list afterwards if anybody has or comes across a sample that they'd like to submit. Yeah, so thank you everybody for joining today. Oh, Troy, did you have something else to share?
Sorry, I keep on cutting in.
Go ahead.
Just want to let anybody on the call here. I've been doing emerald ash borer workshops for last couple of years, and um, I actually I can give any type of workshop. So if you just want like a webinar, I can just talk about the biology, signs, and symptoms. What I've been doing lately, not just in BC, but have also done these workshops in Saskatchewan and Alberta within the last half year, last year. Um, I can actually show you guys how to do trap setup. I can show how to do branch sampling and to actually peel branches to look for EABs. So if there's any interest, if you guys want me to come out and talk about emerald ash borer or other regulated pests, just shoot me an email and we can talk about that. Well, that's the last thing, Camille. I won't.
No worries. We're 10 minutes ahead of schedule, so if anybody else has any questions or comments they want to share at the end here, please go ahead. Okay, well, if not, then thank you everybody so much for joining and for the presentations today. And have a great rest of your day.
Okay, thank you. See ya.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
everyone.
Troy.